Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Ryan. I'm one quarter of the 4 Coaches for Life, part of the Wellbeing Rebellion. Fortunately, 3 out of 4 of us couldn't make it today. Hope to be back next week or sometime soon, uniting together again. So Jedi Warriors out doing their thing right now. But I just want to get a video going just to keep things rolling along for you guys. Thought we'd just touch base a little bit on some pros and cons and negatives and positives and things that are going on in the world right now. So I think, as you know, if you guys have been paying attention to the media, we've got some totalitarian regimes occurring in places where we wouldn't think that would happen, like the UK and then Victoria, Australia. And as you know, we've talked quite a bit in the past about aspects of this whole pandemic that just don't seem to make much sense as far as the extremes that have been taken, to quelch or control this virus, including, lockdowns that have, happened for months on end, like in some of the South American countries where they were locked down since March and continued to be locked down. We wanted to talk a little bit is that there are some of those negatives going on, and we want to be aware of that because we can see that in countries like Australia and the UK, that can happen anywhere. We expect that in certain places like North Korea, but not necessarily, in the UK or Australia, and that this is something that could possibly come to America. And I know a lot of you guys are from around the world, and some of you are in Japan, and my Japanese friends there, sounds like you guys are just doing fine for the most part. It's pretty good over there. I know we do have some worries about the economy and things like that, and I think next week we'll touch a bit more on the economic factors and some really positive things that we've been hearing about the possibility of like the economy actually doing much better than we expect and growing much faster than we expect. So that's actually a really good thing. I want to talk a little bit about some of the pros that's going on right now. And a lot of, at least in where I'm at, I'm in the U.S. I'm in Colorado. Many of the states actually are mostly opened up now. We do have some places that are like California that are under pretty strict control, and a lot of this does seem to point to politics as opposed to actually positive aspect of trying to control the virus. And I think at this point in time, we realize that there isn't an ability to control the virus. If you've taken the time to actually look at a lot of the data and a lot of the research, and I'd recommend looking at Ivor Cummins. It's Ivor. His last name is Cummins. He actually is good to follow on Twitter, but he has some good YouTube videos, and one was recently came out, I think, on September 8th or 10th, so fairly updated, to give you a little bit of an idea of what's really happening. Or what has happened and how the virus is actually behaving, as well as the data behind it. And it's really well worth watching. And you can also see how what he calls a case-demic is being created in a lot of these countries to create the continued fear. We know that that's a big driving factor of this. And I will put my little waiver up. There are things that I may mention and talk about, and if any of it is misinformed, I do apologize. I'm not trying to spread information misinformation. That is not my point. My goal is to be as thorough as possible with the data and the information that comes along. Obviously, you have to do your own research. I've done a lot myself. But there are people that you can follow, like Michael Levitt is a Stanford-based professor. He may not be working now, but he's just been phenomenal with his data modeling. There's a guy named Dr. Frank, or I think it's called Follow the Data with Frank. You can follow on Facebook. He's been really good with the US data. And when you actually see the data in graph form and visually, you can begin to really understand and question, why are we making the decisions that we're making? And so I think it's really important to check in on those things. I mean, it's been actually fairly fascinating to watch the pandemic play out, especially when looking at it from the beginning. I tended to look at things from a standpoint of, it didn't really jive well with my intuition, and so I just sat there and waited to see what would happen, and followed some of the details that were going on with that you weren't hearing in the media. So, for example, like the PCR testing, it was common knowledge to a number of scientists and doctors throughout the world that the PCR testing is highly fallible, very highly sensitive, and depending on how many cycles that you run the PCR test, it becomes much more sensitive and can pick up just tiny little fragments that you might have from COVID-19 or possibly other coronaviruses. So quite possible that you may have had an asymptomatic episode 3 months ago, and this test is still picking you up as a positive, and you just have these tiny little fragments that aren't even infectious. I have a strong feeling that we're going to find out in the future that asymptomatic carriers really don't spread the disease. Again, not spreading misinformation. That's just something I suspect what we're going to find. And it seems to be just the way things are spreading. I think we're finding that the virus isn't as contagious as we thought it was. But I could be wrong on that one. But I don't think I am. So, but anyway, back to the PCR testing. So one thing what we do is we have a lot of high false positives, and at a point in time, it's a little bit more okay to have those false positives, I guess you could say, whenever you're having an uprise in deaths, so people actually dying. So during the initial aspect of the pandemic, when the curve, when we were trying to flatten the curve, and the curve is rising, and we had a significant amount of deaths. We had a lot of positive cases at the time, and that makes sense because, if you're getting a lot of positive cases, and even false positives at that point in time, probably not as huge of a deal, because you can see that something's going on there, that there's an uptick in people dying. And the issue now is that we don't, the death count, depending on where you live, for example, in the United States, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, the death count has been exceedingly low. And we're really not in what you consider an epidemic. There may be a couple hot spots here and there, but I don't even think there are any more in the Northern Hemisphere. And so now you have very low death rate, but you continue to now to have these massive spikes in cases. And a lot of that's just for the fact that people were testing quite a bit more. I mean, I live very close to an urgent care, and every weekend when I drive by there's a line of people going to get tested. And what do you expect if you have something, a test that's as highly sensitive as it is? A lot of those people are going to come up with false positives. And so, but a false positive will be counted as a positive because it shows it's a positive, right? But it's just not a real positive. And so now you have multiple, cases. So if you have even a 50% false positive rate, you can imagine 1 in 2 people showing that they're positive, but they're actually, they're not. So you're going to get these false positives, and it just drives the cases up, and that's what the media is using right now to continue to lock down countries and to put in very draconian measures to control this virus that really can't be controlled. It's, in my opinion, viruses are part of evolution, and they do what they do. Virus is gonna virus, and especially with a respiratory virus like this that is more contagious than other types of viruses, and transmits in certain ways that are really just very difficult to stop. I mean, it'd be one thing if the R naught, which is basically the rate of spread, it's called as RO. If that rate of spread was lower, or I mean lower, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. If it was much lower, like other illnesses, you might be able to catch somebody who's infected, quarantine them, and then keep it from spreading. But with a respiratory virus, it's not going to happen. And most of what we're finding too is that this virus is most likely have been around since November, maybe December in this country. And we know that once you have a true positive case, that you probably have about 10 to 20 times I believe it's 10 to 20 times the infectious infectious rates. Otherwise, like if you have that one case, you've already have another 10 or 20 people out there that are infected. So imagine if you're getting 10,000 cases, 100,000 cases, you're testing positive. I mean, you have millions of people. We're not going to contact trace this and stop this. It's just not going to happen. It's everywhere. And many coronaviruses, you get a wave initially, and then it dies off, and then within 18 months it's gone. I mean, it's still there, but it's just not having that potency that it would normally would. So a second wave coming is highly unlikely. And a lot of people are pointing to the Spanish flu as, oh, look at that second wave, that was much bigger. The thing is, depending on who you speak with, or there are a number of scientists that actually believe the second wave was a completely different virus, which would make sense because the initial wave was similar to this one that we're having with COVID-19. It killed mostly the elderly. And then the second wave that came ended up killing, I believe it was like an age range of like 15 to 40, which is interesting since that's a very healthy age range. So it seems like that was actually two different viruses. And I think that's a positive thing that we can look at, is the likelihood of this coronavirus coming back significantly is quite small. The negative thing is that we're coming into the flu season now, and it's going to be very easy to take flu deaths and record them as coronavirus and create another uptick in the death rate. The interesting thing to me is also we've never actually taken a virus and done this type of testing and can done it throughout the year. So what I find fascinating is that you have the coronavirus being tested this whole entire summer, right? Which is a coronavirus, if you actually look at things, it's it's seasonal, much like influenza is. So I'm intrigued if we actually did this type of PCR testing for the influenza virus, that we would find this similar death pattern throughout the year. So basically the virus doesn't go away, it's always there. It's just when the seasons change, which affects us from an environmental standpoint and an immune standpoint, then we have these upticks in actual symptomatic cases. So I have a feeling these viruses don't go anywhere. They're hanging out all the time. And then when the environment changes and our internal environment changes, then we're more apt to get sick. And again, going back to the PCR testing, there are significantly high false positives. And at this point in time, with such a low death rate, the PCR testing is horrible. I mean, it really is creating what we call a case demic. So I'm really looking forward to seeing in the future as more science comes out. These are things that I think a lot of people knew as far as in the scientific community. Some people did voice their opinion about using PCR testing initially. Why the media or our top experts thought that it was very wise to do this testing really makes me question their credibility. I'm looking at people as top experts now, as I'm not so sure that they're really that at the top. A lot of these guys are bureaucrats that have been in an office for a long period of time, and they haven't actually really been out in the field and doing research and following these things. It's pretty fascinating, And then also we're learning too. It looks like there is actually cross reactivity and strong T cell immunity, as well as other factors of immunity that could be involved in defeating this illness. Remember, this illness, it has a 99.98% survival rate, or roughly around that, around that survival rate, when depending on what country you're in, right? So, it's really interesting where we're taking things right now, and the measures that we're taking to stop a virus that is really fairly non-lethal, similar to the flu. People don't want to admit that, I think, especially in certain countries where the virus has been politicized. And I think at this point in time, we need to take more of an apolitical standpoint and look at this from a scientific perspective. And I don't think we're doing that. And I don't think we're doing that at the top levels either. And that I think that's really unfortunate for you as a viewer, as a human being walking on this earth, not to get actually proper information and possibly having your rights and your freedoms taken away. It's disconcerting. We have kids who are stuck at home or doing these online learning programs, or aren't even starting schools. When we look at you look at the research, and more research of this is coming out, is that the kids are relatively immune. Kids will get sick. That does happen. They're not super spreaders as we once would have thought, and teachers aren't getting ultimately that sick from the kids either. Will there be a death in the youth? There have been, there will be. That's what a virus does. Same thing with the flu. The flu actually seems to have more of a higher death rate amongst the youth than COVID-19 does. It's a tragedy that this happens, but it is part of the natural process of things. And if you have a weakened immune system, or issues like that, especially if you're young, you are at a higher risk. Let's be honest about that. And I think that's something that we don't take into consideration right now, is that there are people that are at higher risk. We know for the most part that this is a virus that kills older people, mostly immunocompromised. The death rates are quite low, below the age of 65. We could make better decisions on how to help those people. And I think that they also, I know from my own standpoint, talking to other people, families and older adults, that they know that they can make wise decisions, that whether they want to stay indoors, not indoors, but just stay inside more, or go to a grocery store at a less peak hour, or make decisions that are better for them if they are have any issues with being immunocompromised. We know many people that died in the nursing home, so let's invest some money into shoring up ways to make sure that nursing homes are more equipped in a sense to keep them safe and healthy. And then when we have sick people go to the hospital, let's not send them back into nursing homes. That was, those are some of the decisions that were made in our country, in certain states, that had a very detrimental effect. So, I think it's just we're at a point that, I feel relatively comfortable where I'm at. There's some things I don't like that are going on in the state that I live in. I am glad I'm not in California anymore. Grateful that I moved out of that state. That's a whole different topic. But then we look at places like Australia and the UK, and we're like, what the hell are they doing? So we need to wake up. The beauty is, at least in the US media, we are starting to get some things that I think some people have known for quite some time coming out, as far as like PCR testing, and beginning to realize that, okay, well, a lot of the stuff that we didn't make much sense. Lockdowns, obviously, there's enough data to show that the lockdowns actually didn't do anything. I think personally, it might take a little while, but you're going to see that data is representative of the fact that I personally don't think masks have that much of an effect, if any effect at all. They may in certain situations. That's a possibility. I do like how the countries in Asia do wear masks when they are actually symptomatic and showing symptoms, and the person actually feels ill. Whether the mask actually, it might stop respiratory drops. It's doubtful that it does anything for the aerosols, but it also does let the person know that's around you that I'm not feeling well, so maybe you should stay back a little bit. That from that standpoint, I think makes sense. But healthy people wearing them, I don't see it. People are, if that were the case, these cases wouldn't skyrocket. There's plenty of places where they put in mask mandates after actually the death rate had completely dropped and the cases dropped, and then all of a sudden the cases skyrocketed right after that. So if they worked, those cases shouldn't happen. And in fact, whenever they put a mandate in, you would think that there would be a significant drop in the actual death rates, right? So, and there's arguments different ways on that one. Obviously, that's people didn't wear them well enough, or they didn't take it seriously. You're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't with this whole issue. And I think that's where we are right now, actually, in most of the world. Is most of us are suffering from something called cognitive dissonance. And the best way I think to explain the cognitive dissonance is that you have a belief in something, and when something challenges that belief, it just throws you for a freaking whoa, right? It's like you just stop. You don't know what to do. Especially when something more factual comes into play. Edward Snowden had said something along the lines of, like, we need to start getting rid of we need to start letting facts let facts be over feelings, and not the other way around. And I think that's what's happening right now, is that so many of us are actually really stuck in this world of feeling, and then we have a political belief structure. We have and I think in a positive way with some things is like people are very empathetic. People want to help other people, want to do good. And that's the beauty of, when we have these sayings like we were all in this together, I'm going to do this to protect you, and then you do that to protect me. It's a nice feeling, right? It's a really nice statement that we're really trying to help each other out. Again, not much evidence to support some of the things that we're doing actually are effective, and so I think that's where cognitive dissonance comes into play. And realizing, like, I know people who would have been happy to lock down for months on end to stop and control this virus. The thing is that you don't stop this virus. Control, you might slow it down, right? So you lock things down. Once you reopen, it's coming back. It's going to go through its cycle. It has I think about a 400 to 500 per million death rate. Basically, when it reaches that, around that. I think this is the numbers, and then it tops out. You have to check Michael Levitt's work, but he's for the most part known that since February. So flattening the curve, really, we didn't really do anything to flatten the curve. The virus just flattens itself. Much like every other virus does. Like every year when we have a new novel influenza strain that comes in, we don't panic about that. We knew that's going to come in. It's going to do what it does. And some seasons it's really bad. Some seasons it's not. And then it goes away. And I think that's where we are with the coronavirus. The problem is that we can't get rid of the fear. Everyone's deathly afraid of this. And for most of us, this is a non-issue. And, in the last 9 months, we really should have been taking care of our health and getting our immune systems up for when the winter season comes, not just for coronavirus, but just for any viral age, any viral aspect that's coming in the future. So I think if we can continue to just really, really get our belief systems out of the way, really start to look into the science. And I know that's a hard thing to do because you got it. The science is a bit hard to follow because we're getting so much misinformation through media outlets and things like that. And then there are times when you actually get good science that comes through the media outlets, and then other times it's bad, or you get science that comes into a journal, a reputable journal, and then it's retracted 2 weeks later. So I think it's tough for a lot of people to follow what's going on. And I think that's where you have to take you have to really become unemotional about this. And that's sort of where I am at the moment. Because I do want this world to be a better place. I don't think it's wise to lose our freedoms over a virus, period. I think, maybe initially some of the things that we attempted that we thought might work, that was okay. I can see that there are measures that we'll take, and that's perfectly fine. But at this point in time, we have enough data and evidence that a lot of what we didn't do anything, and so it's time to just move on from there. And so I think Sweden has done a wonderful job of things. Florida, South Dakota, in our country. I think it was Belgium, possibly, or Belarus. I can't remember, but some of those places have done some smart moves. And I actually give kudos to Sweden for, they didn't do everything perfectly, and they were willing to admit that. And an apology is nice, and I think we're deserving of massive apologies. I think in the U.S., for example, we may not get an apology, and I'm hoping that we move in a better direction. I have a strong feeling that what you're going to see is some flips of switches in the media that make it seem like everything's okay, and that everyone did a great job, and then everything was fine, and that way. And there was a article in the paper, in the New York Post yesterday. Unfortunately, I didn't read it, so forgive me for that one. But the headline was just purporting that there's a new strain of coronavirus that seems to evade mask usage and social distancing. And one of two things I immediately thought about that was that we're either going to utilize that as a way to create a more draconian lockdown, and that way everyone's so super social distance then now we can really control this virus, because it's just so contagious and crazy. Because that's basically what they're saying. They weren't saying it was as deadly, but it's more contagious. Personally, I have, and it wasn't a peer review. They did mention that it was not peer reviewed. But I have a strong feeling that it can go the other way, and where they're going to use this and now start letting people stop wearing masks, move on and get a little bit more normal with their life, and saying it's because this new strain of virus, it evades the masks. Like it learned how to it learned how to get around the masks. Come on, let's be serious here. Like, it's not going to learn that. Like they just didn't work from the get-go. the whole idea of the respiratory droplets and people being asymptomatic. I could be wrong. That's just my view. I have a strong feeling that you're going to find that good research and science in the future is going to show that they really were ineffective, and that we've got governments trying to cover their butts. That's basically my synopsis. Positive things here that are going on in certain places, some negative things in other places. No matter what, I think we need to wake up to really question things, get our belief structures out of the way, get our emotions out of the way, really begin to question, because our lives depend on this. And I think people are forgetting too that we're not worrying about the kids and their lives and their futures. We've destroyed economies over a virus that's, for the most part non-lethal, especially to the majority of the world, and that we could actually take care of this in a much better way, and that can benefit all age groups and all of us humans here. And I think it's time that we do that. We wake up to that, because the kids need a future too, folks. So let's wake up a little bit more. Let's question what I've said. If you guys got questions, comments below, and if you want any more info, I can certainly send you to certain people and links and Twitter accounts and videos to watch, and that way you can get a little bit more informed. So hopefully I didn't ramble too long. Miss my partners in crime. It's always good to have long form conversation with a bunch of awesome guys. We're going to be introducing Colin soon. He's going to be our financial guru. I'm Ryan. I'm a little bit more in the physical realm, a bit of mental and spiritual. And that Gab is the emotional, spiritual guy, takes care of those things. And my cousin is going to help you out with your career if you need help with that. I think all of us have something to give and share with you guys. If you guys need any help, feel free to comment below. Most of us are I'm not going to speak for everyone, but most of us are offering some free consultations if you need some help in those worlds and those realms to get your life better on track, and even to get you through this whole situation that we're going through now. Positive thing for me is, surprisingly, with this pandemic and the chaos that's created and ensued, I have not actually gotten any more gray hairs that I can see. So I'm pretty pumped about that. So hope you guys enjoyed this little rant and rave. I just want to keep things rolling along here for the Wellbeing Rebellion. Hopefully all of us will be together again, and we can get some really good videos, some really good info coming for you in the future.